During budget night, I said, "My boss never asked me to split the bill. That's why I show up for him." And my husband shut the spreadsheet, muttered, "Message received," and moved out by morning. I'm Vanessa, 40, and up until 10 months ago, I was married to the most predictable man I've ever met. Keith's 43, works in supply chain, and honestly, believes that paying the bills on time and rolling the trash can to the curb makes him a great husband. We've got a 10-year-old daughter, Lily. She's the bright spot, the one beautiful thing that came out of our 12 years together. You want to know what passion is? It's not Keith asking, "How was your day?" while he scrolls his phone, half listening. It's not 30 seconds of missionary and a pat on the shoulder that leaves me staring at the ceiling wondering, is this really the next 30 years? Passion is feeling seen. It's someone wanting you like you matter, not just as the person who keeps the pantry stocked and shows up at parent-teacher conferences. I work front desk administrator at a medical office. Nothing flashy, but it keeps the lights on. Keith has his logistics job. Our life ran on a beige loop. Work, dinner, help Lily with homework, watch whatever Keith picked, bed, repeat. I started to feel like a ghost in my own house. He'd come in, kiss my forehead like I was his great aunt, ask what was for dinner, and sink into that recliner until bedtime. We were alive, sure, but nothing about it felt like living. I picked up gaming because I needed something that was mine, something he wouldn't turn into another spreadsheet discussion about time management. I stumbled into a strategy game with a chat, and for the first time in years, I had conversations that went deeper than, "Did you schedule Lily's dentist?" That's where I met him, a player who called himself Master D. At first, it was just tactics and casual talk, but he ran our team in a way that was the polar opposite of Keith. Keith's idea of leadership is, what do you think we should do for every decision, big or small? Master D set a direction, explained why, and owned it. When Keith asked what I was doing on the laptop, I said, "Just gaming," and he'd nod and drift back to his phone. No curiosity, no, "What's it about?" A husband who's plugged in doesn't stop at the headline. That should have told me everything about how checked out he was. Master D started messaging me one-on-one. He asked about my thoughts, my plans, what I wanted out of the next 5 years. Real questions, real listening. Not the autopilot check-ins that feel like you're reporting status to a manager. Then he told me about his world, about being a dominant, about guiding women to explore the parts of themselves they'd stuffed down to keep other people comfortable. Something in me woke up. Here was a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't scared to say it. Here was someone who made choices instead of tossing every decision back to me, from what restaurant to what color should the bathroom be. You have no idea how tiring it is to be the only person in a marriage who's allowed to have preferences. I had been carrying that load for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be led with clarity. The first time we video chatted, I felt more seen and wanted than I had in my entire marriage. He looked at me like I was both precious and powerful, not a box to check on Keith's to-do list. He was up front. He had multiple submissives, and they competed for his attention and approval. I didn't expect that to motivate me, but it did. Standards, structure. If you wanted space in his world, you showed up with intention. On our calls, he started giving me simple, precise directions. What to wear for him, how to sit, what words to use. Nothing graphic, nothing I didn't consent to, just deliberate choices that pulled me out of the fog I'd been living in. I followed every instruction, partly because I wanted to, and partly because the clarity itself felt like oxygen. After years of, "Whatever you want, honey," hearing, "This is what I want from you, here's why, now do it," hit a place I didn't know was starving. Meanwhile, home stayed the same. Keith would float by and ask if I needed anything while never once asking who I was becoming. He thought showing up physically was the same as showing up for real. He never asked about the game, about the people I was meeting, about why it lit me up. He didn't notice the way my mood changed after those late-night chats. Or maybe he noticed and decided it was safer not to ask. Either way, it said the same thing. I was invisible in my own house unless something needed doing. With Master D, I wasn't invisible. He pushed me to say what I actually wanted instead of what sounded reasonable. He called out the places I downplayed myself to make other people comfortable. He didn't accept "I don't know" as an answer to questions about my own life. And when I showed up for him, on time, prepared, intentional, he noticed. He rewarded the effort. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just useful, I was chosen. I know how this sounds to people who've never felt starved out of their own life. They hear online and commands, and they picture something cheap. That's not what this was. This was connection with edges, consensual, adult, clear. It held me accountable in ways my marriage never did. Keith measured love by chores done and shows watched side by side. I started to measure love by presence, by attention, by whether someone could look right at me and say, "I see you. Here's what I want from you. Here's what you can expect from me." The longer it went on, the more obvious the split became. With Keith, every day felt like eating plain oatmeal and calling it a meal. With Master D, I remembered what real appetite was. I remembered that my desires weren't a problem to manage. They were a part of me I'd been told to mute. And once you turn the volume back up, it's hard to pretend you don't hear the music. It felt like waking up after years of moving through my own house on autopilot. Keith would be downstairs, halfway watching some forgettable show or quizzing Lily on vocabulary, and I'd be upstairs feeling, for the first time in forever, what it was like to be wanted by someone who didn't confuse predictable with good. I started sending Master D photos and short clips wherever I could grab a sliver of privacy. Our bedroom when Keith was at work, my desk on lunch breaks with the office door locked, even a quick snap in a restaurant bathroom while we were out as a family. The rush of having that secret, intense current humming under an ordinary day was unreal. Meanwhile, Keith, the man who swore he loved me, had no idea how different I'd become from the woman he married. He never asked, never looked closely enough to see the change. When Keith reached for me now and then, I made excuses. The truth was, I couldn't unknot my body for his gentle, sleepy routine after I'd felt real charge crackle across my skin. His hurt looks barely registered beside the electric anticipation of waiting for Master D's next message. Keith's idea of starting something was, want to go to bed early, like he was offering to reschedule a dentist appointment. Master D, on the other hand, was blunt. If I hesitated or waffled, he'd move on. I took that standard seriously. Here, finally, was someone who noticed effort, who pushed me to show up, instead of accepting the lowest version of me because it was easier. Keith had let me fade into the wallpaper. Master D saw what was there and asked for more. The instructions escalated. Clearer, tighter, more consuming. He'd call at odd hours, and I learned to keep my phone charged, my calendar flexible, my excuses ready. I shifted meetings, rearranged errands, and built little pockets of time that belonged only to him. Keith never clocked any of it. He didn't ask why my phone was always face down, or why work calls suddenly popped up after dinner. That's the thing about Keith. Once he files you under reliable, he stops reading the fine print. He trusts the label instead of checking the contents. I kept a record for Master D, timestamps, confirmations, proof I'd followed through. It felt like someone finally tracking the details I'd spent years curating for everybody else. He saw the above and beyond and said so. He made me feel worth the attention it took to hold me to a standard. Keith, by contrast, seemed satisfied as long as I moved quietly around the edges of his life and thanked him for paying the mortgage on time. When Master D said he'd be in my city on business and wanted to meet, I didn't flinch. I told Keith I was meeting my friend Sarah to shop and drove to the address I'd been sent. Sliding into his car felt like stepping sideways into another version of my life, one where I was claimed and looked at and chosen on purpose. We drove to a quiet strip behind some industrial buildings, the kind of place where no one asks questions, and I gave myself to him in the back seat without holding anything back. Part of my mind, because it's never completely off, pictured Keith at home helping Lily glue pictures on her social studies board, maybe flipping grilled cheese on the stove. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Keith, steady and predictable. Me, finally letting myself be taken by someone who knew how to want. He photographed everything. Proof, he said, proof of my dedication, something he could show the other women to demonstrate what real submission looked like. I felt proud, ridiculously proud. Seen, approved. For once praised for the energy I poured into something instead of treated like that energy was expected. When I got back, Keith asked if shopping with Sarah was fun, without taking his eyes off the laptop. I said it was fine, and he nodded, absorbed in some spreadsheet. That was our marriage in one frame. A question asked on autopilot, and an answer he didn't need to hear. Later in bed, he reached for me and my stomach rolled. I couldn't rewind to tepid and careful after the heat I'd just walked through. I told him I had a headache and turned away. He said, "Okay," and went to sleep. That's Keith in a sentence. No persistence, no curiosity about what the headache really meant, no fight for the thing he claimed to want. If he cared about the connection, wouldn't he have pressed, asked, pushed to understand what had changed? Wouldn't he have looked me in the eye and said, "What's going on with us?" Instead, he tucked the moment into the same folder where he keeps every other inconvenient feeling, filed and forgotten, and I lay there staring at the dark, knowing exactly why I couldn't go back. Keith found the messages by accident. He grabbed my phone to call his sister Patricia because his battery had died. I should have tightened my lock screen and notifications, but the truth is, living this double life had worn me down. Keeping two versions of myself straight, dutiful wife downstairs, electric secret upstairs, was exhausting. Maybe some part of me wanted the truth to burst out so I could stop pretending. He came at me with screenshots, handshaking, voice louder than I'd heard it in years. Relief and irritation hit me at the same time. Relief, because at least the mask was off. Irritation, because it took scandal on a screen to make my husband actually look me in the eye. He demanded names, timelines, specifics. Who Master D was, how long it had been, what we'd done. For the first time in forever, Keith was tuned in, fully present, like I'd flipped a switch he forgot existed. I told him the truth. I was done propping up the story, that our marriage satisfied me. I said Master D gave me what Keith never did. Actual desire, real heat, a feeling of being claimed and chosen by someone decisive. Keith did what Keith does. Hurt feelings first, accusations second, a speech about betrayal, and our family third. What he never did was ask why. He never asked how we got here, or what he'd missed, or what he could have done differently to stop the rot before it set in. Instead, he fixated on comparison. He wanted humiliating details, wanted to line himself up next to Master D like we were filling out a scorecard. When I tried to explain that parts of me had woken up after years of being ignored, he said I was making excuses, shifting blame, refusing accountability. The man who sleepwalked through a decade suddenly wanted to be outraged that I'd found oxygen somewhere else. What does he have that I don't? He kept pressing. Everything, I wanted to shout. Certainty, direction, the nerve to pursue me instead of waiting for me to do all the chasing. I agreed to marriage counseling, mostly to buy time and figure out my next move. The therapist, a kind older woman who, from minute one, felt aligned with Keith, talked in loops about accountability, boundaries, rebuilding trust. She wanted tidy sentences. "I'm sorry, I'll stop, it won't happen again." She wanted me to promise I'd never look outside the marriage for what Keith refused to provide. I couldn't give her that. I wasn't sorry for waking up. I was sorry he found out before I was ready to have the hard conversation. But I wasn't sorry for choosing real desire over being a roommate who warmed his bed out of habit. We kept circling betrayal and commitment. I asked about the slow betrayal of indifference. The way a partner can break vows by letting the relationship atrophy while still checking every good guy box. She nodded, wrote notes, and led us back to my affair. The message was clear. My sin was visible, his was acceptable. Right after Keith reached out to him, yes, he actually contacted the man, Master D went silent. No replies, no calls, nothing. Once the situation had consequences, the thrill evaporated. Typical, I told myself later. He liked the control and the chase, not the cleanup. He wasn't going to stand in a courtroom and say he wanted me. He wasn't going to fight for anything beyond the glow he'd curated. 4 months after the blow-up, Keith filed. He said he couldn't trust me, couldn't get past it, couldn't rebuild with someone who had lived a lie. What lodged in my chest wasn't the filing, it was what never came. He never asked, even once, is there something I could have done differently? He never examined the quiet years where I disappeared in plain sight. The legal part was brutal. His lawyer painted me as the selfish wife who torched a good home for thrills. Keith sat there in his work shirt, looking like the wronged man who did everything right, and the room believed him. Nobody wanted to hear about the long erosion, the 1,000 small ways a marriage dies when one person stops showing up with heart. On paper, my affair was a clean line. His neglect was fog. In the end, the judge granted Keith primary custody of Lily. It stunned me. I thought mothers had a built-in edge, but apparently one affair weighs more than a decade of being taken for granted. I got generous visitation and a schedule that makes sense on a calendar and hurts in the quiet. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt the oddest mix. Grief for what we'd broken, anger at the story everyone preferred to believe, and a thin, stubborn thread of clarity. I did wrong. I also told the truth. Both can be real at the same time. Lily keeps asking when her dad and I are getting back together, and every time she does, it lands like a rock in my chest. I hate that I'm the one wearing the black hat in this story, like I'm the villain for refusing to keep play-acting a marriage that was already dead just to make the neighbors comfortable. It's been 10 months since Keith moved out, and I squeezed myself and my boxes into this cramped one-bedroom, and I'm still trying to make sense of how fast everything came apart. He kept the house because he could carry the mortgage solo. I'm over here counting receipts and juggling rent with a calculator, while he's sleeping in the bedroom we painted together and mowing the lawn like nothing happened. He's already seeing someone. I found out the way I find out everything about Keith now, through the grapevine, from friends who sound way too excited to pass along how happy he is. Her name's Rebecca, quiet type, works in accounting. From what I've heard, she calls Keith's predictability stability, which is a generous way of saying he lives by a checklist. They can have each other. Truly. If she wants a life where the big surprise is switching from salmon to chicken on Tuesday night, she's got her man. What stings isn't that he moved on, it's how quick. 6 months after the ink dried, he was introducing Rebecca to Lily and posing for photos like they were a ready-made family out of a brochure. Meanwhile, I'm here trying to build a new life from pieces I didn't even realize I'd smashed chasing something real. People keep telling me I tossed a good man. They think good means pays bills, shows up on time, never raises his voice. They don't get what it's like to live with a person who lets you fade until you can't hear your own thoughts. Good men don't let their wives disappear and then act stunned when those wives go hunting for a pulse. Nice is fine for customer service. It's not enough when you're starving for real closeness and someone who actually sees you. Dating at 40 is its own kind of hard. Guys my age look past me for women in their 20s, or they want a plug-and-play stepmom to fold into their existing system by next weekend. Very few of them want a woman who's still figuring out what lights her up, who's just now learning what true desire feels like after years of settling for lukewarm. I'm not a project and I'm not a replacement part. Try explaining that on a second date. I keep telling myself Keith's new joy is rebound shine, that in time he'll realize what he lost with me once the shine wears off and the routine sets in. But last week, when he picked up Lily, I watched him from the porch. He looked easy in his skin, sure of himself in a way I don't remember from our marriage. He buckled Lily in, cracked a joke, waved. No hesitation in his posture, no storm cloud in his eyes. For the first time, I had to admit the thought I'd been dodging. Maybe the divorce was the best thing that ever happened to him. I won't say that out loud, because I still believe I deserved more than what he gave. I deserved to be chased a little. I deserved to be someone worth learning, worth the extra effort. Keith never made me feel like I was a prize, worth stepping up for. If he learned that because of the wreckage of us, good for Rebecca. She's getting the man I spent 12 years trying to coax out. That's the hardest cut. She gets Keith 2.0, present, attentive, the version that figured out how to look someone in the eye and show up. I was the beta test, the rough draft. I can't regret choosing myself over a marriage that was suffocating the real me. I won't apologize for finally putting my needs at the front of the line instead of living on scraps of attention and calling it dinner. Folks say, I destroyed the family, but what family are we talking about? We were 3 people under one roof acting out to script, packing lunches, paying bills, smiling for pictures, while I slowly turned transparent inside his neat little life. At least now, I know what desire actually feels like. I know what it's like to be wanted by someone who claims you with both hands, even if that someone turned out to be a coward who vanished when it got complicated. I won't pretend there isn't regret there, but I also won't pretend I didn't finally taste what I'd been missing with Keith all those years. That matters, even if it came with a price. Sometimes, late at night, I run the what-ifs. What if I'd tried harder to put words to how invisible I felt before I went looking elsewhere? What if I'd sat Keith down and said, "Listen, I'm drowning. I need you to fight for us, for me." Maybe he would have heard me. Maybe we would have gotten help sooner, before the rot got into the beams. Other times I think I did say it, just not in a way he could understand. I left hints like breadcrumbs, long silences after dinner, jokes that weren't jokes, small requests I couldn't explain. He needed a headline. I gave him footnotes. I own that. Even so, I won't rewrite the whole story to make everyone else comfortable. I can love Lily fiercely, respect Keith as her dad, and still tell the truth about what our marriage did to me. I can be learning, stumbling, paying rent in a too small place, and still be more alive than I was in that big house with a perfect lawn. Maybe Rebecca gets the steadier version of the man I tried to reach. Fine. Maybe I get the messier road, with more uncertainty and more air. Also fine. I'd rather build something honest from scratch than polish the old picture frame and pretend the photo inside still looks like me. If I'm honest, Keith was never the guy who could sit in the fire of a hard conversation. He'd reach for the safest tools in the drawer. Let's schedule date night. Maybe we should try a couples workshop. What if we plan a weekend away? All the surface fixes that polish the frame without touching the cracked picture inside. He'd miss the point like clockwork, the way he always did. I didn't need a coupon for dinner and a movie. I needed a partner who could look me in the eye and say, "I see you slipping. Tell me what it would take to bring you back." The therapist kept repeating that line about responsibility, and I understand why it's there. I did make choices, and I don't duck that, but there's a piece they never tell you how to hold. How do you own the part where you want to feel alive in your own skin? How do you apologize for refusing to spend decades in a marriage where you're slowly fading from color to grayscale? People are quick to name the visible wound. They have less language for the slow attrition that leaves a person hollow. Yes, maybe Keith is thriving now with his new girlfriend, and that's fine. But his green shoots don't erase the seasons he let me sit on a shelf like a lamp that only needed dusting once a week. You can be polite, punctual, and present, and still treat a person like furniture, useful, familiar, easy to ignore until something squeaks. Most days, I remind myself that being alone is cleaner than being invisible. The quiet of this apartment may echo, but at least it's honest. Then, There are the harder days, when I wonder if warm tap water might have been easier than ice in the veins, if lukewarm would have been enough to coast. But when I let that thought breathe, I bump into the memory of how awake I felt with Master D. The charged attention, the sense of being wanted on purpose, the way my name sounded when someone actually meant it. I can't pretend that connection is trivial. Once you've felt that kind of voltage, you know the difference between a light that's on and a bulb that only glows because the sun is hitting it. From what filters back through the friend network, Keith and Rebecca are already talking about moving in together. Good for them, honestly. Maybe she's the person who can translate his brand of steady into something that feels like romance instead of suffocation. Maybe predictability reads as promise to her. A shared calendar, consistent routines, no sharp corners. Some people don't need storm and flame to feel fulfilled. They want a porch light that flips on right at dusk and never burns out. Me? I'm still waiting for someone who brings what I tasted. Focus, desire, clarity, but pairs it with courage. Not a ghost who vanishes when life stops being tidy. Not a man who only wants the bright, edited parts of me. I want someone who sees me as a choice every day and a fight worth showing up for, not convenient background support when he's between bigger priorities. That means starting over at 40 with a thinner wallet, a smaller closet, and a heart that's finally telling the truth. It means telling myself, sometimes out loud, that the memory of real passion isn't a curse, it's a compass. It points me away from rooms where I'm only welcome if I keep quiet, and points me toward the places that ask for my voice. I'm not interested in being anyone's lesson plan again. I'm interested in building something that doesn't require me to disappear to keep the peace. Maybe that takes time. Maybe it takes a string of first coffees, a few wrong turns, and a handful of nights staring at the ceiling reminding myself I chose this path on purpose. But I know what I won't do. I won't barter away my pulse for a house that looks good in pictures. I won't apologize for wanting heat and depth, and a partner who can handle both. If Rebecca finds him dependable, and that dependability sings to her, then they're right for each other in a way we never were. I can be glad for that and still hold my own line, because for me, steady without soul was just another word for slow erasure. I climbed out of that on purpose, and even if the road ahead is messier, I'd rather stumble forward with my eyes open than sleepwalk perfectly in place. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching.